Concise Curriculum, Social Studies, Georgia Standards of Excellence blended with ELA Georgia Standards of Excellence. Introductory webinar for grades 3 through 5. What is Concise Curriculum? Some of you may not know what Concise Curriculum is, but Concise Curriculum is a curriculum that blends or integrates the content instruction of social studies standards with ELA and reading standards. Who benefits from Concise Curriculum? All students can benefit from Concise Curriculum. In every classroom, there are regular education students, there are special education students, there are ELL, EIP, ADD, and ADHD students. Who benefits from Concise Curriculum? Our classrooms today are filled with many different types of students. We have regular education students, special education students, ELL, EIP students. We even have ADD and ADHD students. Through years of research and experience, Concise Curriculum provides educators with the tools necessary to meet the needs of all learners in your classrooms. Benefits of Concise Curriculum. Teach 3 subjects at once. Language, reading, and social studies are constantly reinforced when using Concise Curriculum. Kids get it because they are seeing the material over and over. So when teaching language, reading, and social studies together, the constant reinforcement benefits all of your students. With Concise Curriculum, students are reading on-grade level passages in smaller chunks to build stamina. Stamina is very important with reading and doing the longer passages on the milestones test. Some lessons have longer chunks as stamina increases. The higher grade level passages are longer and appropriate for that particular grade. Why was Concise Curriculum developed? Teachers didn't have the time or the resources to effectively teach science and social studies. Social studies and science time was often used and needed to teach reading, ELA, and even math. Teachers were taking time from social studies and science to teach these other subject areas such as ELA and math, and social studies and science was neglected. Remember, social studies is a neglected subject. Teachers can't spend the time needed in social studies because of the pressure to focus on ELA, reading, and math. Teachers feel pressure to have high reading and math scores and do not focus on social studies or science. When implemented correctly, social studies blended or integrated content can boost ELA scores. Again, social studies is a neglected subject. When implemented correctly, social studies blended or integrated content can boost ELA scores and ultimately student learning. Ask yourself, why not help students become better readers and writers during social studies content instruction? In the past, teachers have always thought that social studies was just for looking at maps or drawing pictures, but in fact, social studies is a great time for a student to become a better reader and a better writer. Let's look at the research. Research shows that students learn and retain more information when subject matter is integrated and tied together rather than when it is isolated. Research also shows that students do not retain as much information when skills are taught in isolation. Let's look at some research examples. There is a body of research related to how children learn that supports curriculum integration. Cromwell, 1989. Brain research points towards interdisciplinary learning, thematic teaching, experiential education, and teaching that is responsive to student learning styles. These findings are summarized by Shoemaker. 1991, pages 793 through 797. What exactly is a blended or integrated curriculum? It really sounds so simple, and it is. It is all about making connections. Social Studies ELA curriculum. Integrating ELA and social studies helps students see the natural connections between and across subject areas. After all, history is simply a series of stories about people, events, and places from the past. The historical figures that students study in social studies become characters that students read and learn about. Social studies is full of wonderful characters to study and interesting topics to learn about. In elementary school, students learn to sequence events in their reading. They determine what happened in the beginning, middle, and end of a story. Isn't this similar to teaching chronological order of events or making timelines in social studies? Setting is also an important literacy skill. Students are taught to pull details from text in order to determine where the story takes place and how the place affects the events and characters in a story. This is similar to the study of social studies or geography. Students read about location, place, and the people and their influence with their environment. Each lesson contains the new Georgia Standards of Excellence Social Studies Standards, the Georgia Standards of Excellence English Language Arts Standards, including vocabulary skills, reading comprehension skills, and language arts convention skills. Each lesson also contains writing standards, constructed response, including narrative writing, informative explanatory writing, opinion writing, along with extended response. An important component of concise curriculum is the vocabulary. The vocabulary includes context clues, synonyms and antonyms, prefixes and suffixes, and multiple meaning words. Another important component of concise curriculum is the reading comprehension skills. Literal or right there questions are included in each lesson, inference questions, main idea, cause and effect, and chronological order. Another important component of concise curriculum are the language arts and convention standards. We have included parts of speech, usage and mechanics, which includes capitalization, spelling, and punctuation, the conventions with subject and verb agreement, sentence skills, including types of sentences and sentence fragments. Another important component of concise curriculum are the new Georgia Standards of Excellence writing standards. We have included constructed response questions with each passage, how to write constructed responses, and daily practice with writing constructed responses. Outlines are included in the student book to aid or help the students with learning how to write constructed responses. We have also included extended responses and paired passages. Lexile levels are very important as well. Building students' lexile levels is important to ensure student success in all academic areas. Through correct daily instruction of ELA and reading standards, including daily evidence-based writing instruction, students can increase their lexile levels. Let's look at the Lexile levels for third grade. They average between 500 and 1,000 Lexiles. Rigorous, but allowing for scaffolding with chunks of grade level text. The Lexile levels for fourth grade average between 600 and 1,000 Lexiles. Again, they are rigorous, but they allow for scaffolding with chunks of grade level text. The Lexile levels for fifth grade average between 700 and 1,000 Lexiles. Rigorous, but allowing for scaffolding with chunks of grade level text. Students must be provided with rigor in all subject areas. Concise curriculum provides rigor by using nonfiction social studies text. Nonfiction social studies texts have higher Lexile levels than fiction text. Daily practice with nonfiction text will increase Lexile levels. Every social studies lesson is designed as an ELA reading comprehension lesson. While students are learning necessary social studies content, they are increasing their Lexile levels by practicing ELA and reading comprehension. Students' reading levels and comprehension will increase throughout the year with daily use of concise curriculum. And again, daily use and practice of concise curriculum. In order to increase Lexile levels, the students need daily use of concise curriculum and consistent use of concise curriculum. Let's talk about some of the additional components of concise curriculum. Paired passages, extended responses, questions about timelines, and maps. The Georgia Standards of Excellence call for the integration of subject areas. Concise curriculum has been doing this for years. The Georgia Standards of Excellence calls for the integration of subject areas. We are helping you meet the needs of your students while meeting state requirements. Why does concise curriculum work? It works because it spirals throughout the year. Skills are not forgotten since the skills are taught over and over, spiraling through the year. The skills are not taught once during the year and forgotten. For example, the students are not learning something in August and they don't see it again for the rest of the year. They are learning it over and over. Each social studies lesson continually teaches and reinforces the various language and reading skills. What are the benefits of concise curriculum? Concise curriculum targets critical areas of reading instruction for elementary students. Students need targeted reading and writing instruction. Concise curriculum targets reading comprehension, vocabulary, and evidence-based writing. How can concise curriculum help my students excel on the Georgia Milestones test? Now let's look at the area of reading comprehension. Each lesson teaches reading comprehension by asking literal or right there questions and inference questions. Students are taught comprehension with every social studies lesson. The exciting news is that students are taught reading comprehension and writing with every social studies lesson. Now let's look at literal or right there comprehension questions. Here is an example from one of the 5th grade texts. Texas ranchers started moving cattle north into Kansas. One of the most famous cattle trails during this time was called the Chisholm Trail. Jesse Chisholm was a trader who had built several trading posts in western Oklahoma before the Civil War. This trail went from southern Texas to Abilene, Kansas. Once the cattle arrived in Abilene, they were placed in pens. The cattle were held in the pens until the train arrived to take them further north. As the railroad expanded, other cities also built cattle pens. These cities were called cow towns. Question 1, who was Jesse Chisholm? And question 2, what is a cow town? Let's look at the literal or right there questions that go along with this passage. Who was Jesse Chisholm? And what is a cow town? If you look at the passage, the answers are highlighted in red. Jesse Chisholm was a trader who had built several trading posts in western Oklahoma before the Civil War. And the answer to the question, what is a cow town? Other cities also built cattle pens. These cities were called cow towns. The answers to literal or right there questions are found directly in the text. The student can underline, circle, or highlight the answer to a right there question. Now let's look at inference questions. The answer to an inference question is not always found in the passage. You can use clues from the passage to answer the question. What type of person is usually awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? Now let's look at the passage that will help us answer that inference question. President Teddy Roosevelt believed the United States was powerful and other countries should look to the U.S. for guidance. He helped Russia and Japan work out a peace agreement when they were at war with each other. The Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to him for helping to bring peace to the world. What type of person is usually awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? The text doesn't say what type of person is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The text discusses some of the things he did to help the world. The student must infer what qualities someone would have in order to do the types of things that Roosevelt did to help the world. Now let's look at the answer to that question. What type of person is usually awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? The type of person that is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize is someone who does good things for others and tries to help other people in the world. They probably are nice and kind. They care about others. Again, the answer was not directly in the passage, but the students used clues to inference and to find their answer. It is critical to teach inference questions on a daily or regular basis. Read the statement from the text below. Rustlers would also try and steal cattle away from their owners. What do you think a rustler is? Inference questions are the hardest type of questions to teach. Students may need to read and reread the passage several times before figuring out the correct answer. Read the statement from the text below. Rustlers would also try and steal cattle away from their owners. What do you think a rustler is? The answer to an inference question is not directly stated in the text. However, there are clues to the answer in the text. Students must make a connection between the text and their brain. The student will read the text and make a decision based on what they have read. Since the text states that rustlers try and steal cattle away from their owners, the student will infer that a rustler is a person who steals cattle. This may seem like a very simple inference, but it is important to realize that many students with poor reading comprehension skills will not be able to make that connection at first. That is why inference questions are so valuable in helping students build their comprehension skills. Now let's look at the area of vocabulary. Another important component of concise curriculum is the vocabulary section for each lesson. Dictionary skills. One way to teach vocabulary skills is by using the dictionary. There are two ways to teach the vocabulary for each section. Vocabulary words for each lesson are listed at the beginning of each unit. Students can look up the words in the dictionary and write the definition before participating in the lesson. In reality, this is not the best method. Dictionary skills are a standard, which is why it was written this way. Also, it is important to know which vocabulary words are included in each lesson. Again, the dictionary method is not the best way to teach vocabulary. Now let's look at context clues. Context clues. This is the best way to teach vocabulary. We recommend having the students read through each lesson and using context clues to figure out the meaning of each vocabulary word. A dictionary could be used after the students use context clues to figure out the words to check to see if the students are correct. If this is difficult for students at first, keep trying. After a few lessons, the students will get better and better. And remember, context clues are the best way for students to learn vocabulary. Students need to practice using their brain combined with context clues in order to get better at figuring out the meanings of the vocabulary words. Using context clues. Try this as a whole class or small group at first. Have the students review the vocabulary words at the beginning of each lesson. Then ask them to read through the lesson, individually or as a class, and try to figure out what each word means. Using context clues. You will be surprised. Students can generally figure out what each word means. A dictionary definition generally means nothing to a student. Again, a dictionary definition generally means nothing to a student. Students do not understand the wordy dictionary definitions. Therefore, looking up words in a dictionary can be a waste of time. Other ideas to get started using context clues. The teacher can write the definitions on the smartboard or board without revealing the vocabulary word. After reading the text, students can then match up the definitions with the correct vocabulary word. This is a great way to start teaching context clues. Students can do this, and this helps students increase their vocabulary and ultimately their reading comprehension. Why teach vocabulary by using context clues? Context clues can be the single most beneficial skill that you ever teach your students. Ever. When teaching vocabulary by using context clues, this forces the students to think. When students read the text or passage with the intent of figuring out the meaning of a vocabulary word, this forces them to think about what they are reading instead of just calling the words. Each lesson in the Concise Curriculum has a context clues section at the top of each page. This will help the students practice using context clues with that one word. We do recommend also using context clues with the other words in the lesson as well. Now let's look at multiple meaning words. Multiple meaning words are very important when teaching reading in the content areas. Many words in the English language have more than one meaning. This again emphasizes the importance of students knowing what context clues are and how to use them. Students will use context clues in order to figure out which meaning is correct when determining the definition of a multiple meaning word. Context clues equals reading comprehension. Now let's look at an example of a multiple meaning word, the word drive. Drive has 3 definitions. Definition 1 means energy. Definition 2, to operate a car. Definition 3, to move cattle from one place to another. Choose the correct definition that matches the way the word is used in each sentence below. 1. Marnie will drive herself to school when she is 16. 2. My teacher has a lot of drive, pep, and enthusiasm. 3. A cattle drive was the best way to move cattle to market. 4. Can you drive a car yet? This task is impossible unless the students use context clues in each sentence. When reading the passages in the student book, students will also practice using context clues. Sentence number 1, Marnie will drive herself to school when she is 16, matches with definition 2, to operate a car. Sentence number 2, my teacher has a lot of drive, pep, and enthusiasm, matches with definition number 1, to have energy. Sentence number 3, a cattle drive was the best way to move cattle to market, matches with definition 3, to move cattle from one place to another. Sentence number 4, can you drive a car yet, matches with definition 2, to operate a car. Again, if the students aren't using context clues, they will not be able to match up the definitions for multiple meaning words. When students read the word drive in the section about the cattle drives, they would use context clues to determine that the correct definition would be definition 3, to move cattle from one place to another. The other 2 definitions would not make sense when talking about a cattle drive. All right, look at another sentence with a multiple meaning word. They also had to pay a special tax to pan for gold. Which definition matches the definition of the word pan as it is used in the sentence above? Definition 1, a pot or saucepan used for cooking. Definition 2, a container used for separating metals. They also had to pay a special tax to pan for gold. Remember, there were 2 definitions for the word pan. If the students don't pick the correct meaning of pan, then they are not using context clues and not comprehending what they have read. Definition 2, a container used for separating metals, is the only definition that makes sense. This skill will ultimately carry over into students' comprehension of longer texts. Now let's look at constructed response. Why is it important? Constructed response questions and answers are important because they force the students to think. Students can no longer rely on A, B, C, or even D answer choices. Concise Curriculum student books have constructed response questions and prompts built into each daily lesson. This provides students with the valuable practice of answering constructed response questions during social studies learning time. So ask yourself, how can we prepare our students for the rigor on the milestones test? We can teach nonfiction passages on a daily basis. Why not teach the required Georgia Standards of Excellence social studies standards while preparing students for the rigor of the ELA constructed response questions on the milestones test? Here are some of the types of questions with the writing: opinion, informative and explanatory, and narrative. Concise Curriculum teaches students to analyze the question, what is the question asking, and what evidence can I find in the text to help me answer the question. Ask yourself, why do students have trouble with the constructed response questions on the Georgia Milestones test? Students have trouble because they don't know or understand what the question is asking. They don't understand how to deconstruct the constructed response question. Students must deconstruct before they can construct a response. Here is our outline for helping students with the constructed response questions. ICE. I, introduce the topic. C, cite evidence from the text to answer the question. And E, explain your answer and your ending. This is a simple method that students can remember. ICE, introduce the topic, cite evidence from the text, explain your answer, and write an ending. With daily and weekly practice answering constructed response questions, students will improve their writing and therefore their comprehension of the text they are writing about. Again, this is very important. With daily and weekly practice answering constructed response questions, students will improve their writing and therefore improve their comprehension of the text they are writing about. In each grade level webinar, we will have more in-depth instruction on how to help students write constructed and extended responses using the ICE method. Now let's talk about summarizing the text. Summarizing is also an important comprehension skill. Many people think summarizing is a writing skill. Summarizing is not a writing skill. Summarizing is actually a reading comprehension skill. Students cannot summarize a text correctly if they haven't comprehended the text they have read. Concise Curriculum teaches summarizing by including key vocabulary words in the text for the students to use in their summary. This helps students organize their thoughts and focus on the key words in the text. When summarizing the text, another student should be able to read their partner's summary and understand what the story is about. If the student accurately comprehends the text, their summary will make sense. Summaries are a great way to teach students to think about the text they have read and also think about how to retell the story to someone else. Summarizing is simply retelling the story or text in your own words. Summarizing also helps build the skills to accurately answer many constructed response questions. Now let's look at interpreting timelines. Reading and interpreting timelines. This is actually a very important reading skill. Many people don't see this as a reading skill, but it actually is. Timelines can actually be written as a reading passage. Timelines are just short passages written differently on a timeline. Students read a timeline about an important historical figure. Those events could actually be strung or put together to make a paragraph about that person's life. Here are some dates that we will look at. Number 1, in 1868, Edison received his first patent. Number 2, Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3, 1847. Number 3, Thomas Alva Edison was born February 11, 1847. Number 4, in December of 1903, the Wright brothers took to the air with their first powered flight. Look at a timeline. Students are asked to make a timeline and put the events in the correct order. The teacher will need to discuss with students that the smallest year is actually the oldest date and would go first on a timeline. Also, if there are 2 years that are the same, then the teacher will need to discuss the different months with the students and how to find which date would go first on a timeline. Let's look at these 2 dates. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3, 1847. Thomas Alva Edison was born on February 11, 1847. There are 2 years that are the same. March 3, 1847 and February 11, 1847. When you have 2 years that are the same, you need to look at the months. March 3, 1847 and February 11, 1847. Which date would be first on a timeline? The date would be February 11, 1847. The reason why is because February comes before March in the calendar year. Let's look at some additional ELA skills. Run-on sentences. Students will rewrite run-on sentences correctly, and students will also choose which sentence is a run-on from a group of sentences. Another additional ELA skill is parts of speech. Students will correctly identify various parts of speech in different sentences. Parts of speech. Students will correctly use various parts of speech in original sentences. Usage and mechanics. Students will correctly identify misspelled words in sentences. Students will correctly identify words that need to be capitalized, and students will also identify verb forms that are used incorrectly. The complete curriculum package. Student books along with a reproducible assessment guide make a complete curriculum package to meet the needs of all elementary learners. For a more in-depth explanation, please proceed to your grade level specific webinar.